Welcome to Digimon.
Hello and welcome to Digimon, and welcome to our first filmed video of 2025. Everything else that's come out so far in 2025 was pre-recorded in 2024. This is the first video I'm filming in 2025. Like and subscribe and ding that notification bell for more updates from the channel. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of this year, so every little helps in terms of that. Now, what are we doing today? Well, I wanted to take a look at the EX08 tier list that we've currently got as our poll for our Jank Tank format. Now, this is also a tier list that will be kind of, good to see in terms of current meta and stuff like that, but also like in regards to the actual Jank Tank format, this tier list determines what decks will be legal in that format. Then there will be spoilers for Jank Tank the Champions, so do make sure to go ahead and watch that before you watch this, just to make sure you're avoiding spoilers. If you don't care about spoilers, then I guess stick around. But I haven't actually put my votes in yet, and the voting poll is still live. By the time you guys are watching this, the poll will still be up as well, so I'll put a link in the pinned comments below, and the poll will be live until Thursday morning. That is, I believe, Thursday the 8th. Thursday the 8th? Hang on. Calendar. Dates. Monday's the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, Thursday the 9th. It's Thursday the 9th, I think, is when the poll is going to be gone. I'm not very good with timing, guys. But anyways, let's get into it, because we've got a hell of a lot of decks to go through. As you can see, I've only been adding decks to this tier list as time has gone on. I've not been taking any away, so we've got a lot of decks to go through, and I'm going to try and do this as quick as possible. The last time I did a tier list video, it took me over an hour, so just from filming it. So I'm hoping I can get this done a little bit more quickly, but all this rambling does not help. One thing to note as well, if you do decide to vote on this tier list yourself, make sure you are logged in to the tier maker website. If you're not, the votes do not actually count. So, for example, these participants right here, if you take a look, it says 31 participants, but if you actually look at our first deck that we'll be talking about, Titamon, the combined votes on here is only 14. So, we realised that, and literally all of the guys have been logging into the website, which is quite funny, especially because of the fact we've not realised that for close to a year, because it's been pretty much just a year since we've been doing Jank Tank. And I don't know, over a year since we're doing Jank Tank, and the tier list, I think we're coming up to a year, possibly, I don't know. But anyways, let's get into the tier list, and none of these are in any particular order, by the way. Right, first deck we are looking at, and well, that's just good, that's come up on screen. The internet now knows I've been listening to Nickelback. Anyways, right. First deck we're talking about, Titamon. Now, this is a deck that I absolutely love. Now, it is a bit of a contentious one, because we do have a rule in Jank Tank that says that meta engines are banned, and Titamon actually does use the Dark Animal engine, at least when I've built it. If anything, Lord Nightmon X is the better version of the Titamon deck. However, I am going to go with the general consensus here and put it into Jank tier, because of the fact it's a little bit too cumbersome most of the time. Now we've got the Jank Tank 7 champion in Purodramon Fight Mode, and this is actually a duplicate on here, so I'll be going down to just put our vote on this, and I would put this into Rogue tier currently. This is just an EX8 tier list. This is not a 2.5 tier list. I'm just going to find the other red, purple Imperial, because I accidentally put it on here twice. If it will work for me. There we go. And just put that into Rogue tier as well. But it's essentially, because I'm not quite taking the 2.5 stuff into account, the BT20 stuff, because we've not had all of the new reveals for that. This is only taking EX8 into account. If we were taking BT20, I actually probably think Red, Purple, and Imperial would be going up the tier list a bit, because some of the new stuff from BT20 that's been revealed thus far is really good. The new Red, Purple, Imperial one's really cool. The option that got revealed as of today when I'm recording is cracked. just play any free Digimon for 5 reduced cost. Oh, have you got a Valkyrie 1 Ace in? You're trash. Oh yeah, I'll play that for 2. But yeah, for now, Rogue tier. Machine Dramon. This is also another one I'm going to put in Rogue tier. Reason being is because of the fact that the really good version of Machine Dramon will not be legal in this because of the meta engine rule. The really good version of it uses the purple hybrid engine, and that's not going to be legal in Jank Tank. So I'm putting it in Rogue tier here. If I was doing a more consensus thing for the whole game, possibly I'd be looking at tier 2, maybe even 1.5. But for Jank Tank specifically, I'm putting it in Rogue tier. And the fact is, Mashijiron's always been a bit of a Rogue deck, so I want to keep it there. Then it's my boy, Marsmon, who, actually, I will be doing a deck profile on Marsmon this week, because, as you will have noticed, there was no deck profile for Jank Tank last week, because the Imperial Dramon one has not changed. Spoilers. But the deck profile for that has not changed at all, so I'm actually going to look at Marsmon later this week. Probably be releasing that on Wednesday. But Marsmon, there's some people that have been putting it in Rogue tier, some people in Jank tier. Yes, it's one of my decks, but I am going to put it in Jank tier. It's very much a red toolbox deck. It does not have the best consistency. It can really go off if it's got the right setup, but it's also very easy to play around because its whole shtick is the raid mechanic, and all you need to do is either make sure you don't have a Digimon out, or if you do have a Digimon out, make sure that Digimon is suspended, and then they can't do their raid shenanigans. Half their inheritables then don't go off. Yeah, Marsmon is a Jank deck for sure. Next is Venusmon. Now, this is the first one that I would probably say is squarely in tier 2. Venusmon, in general, is a very splashable card and goes into quite a few different yellow decks. And I think because of that, it is a tier 2 card. It's getting less and less powerful as time goes on. But for the meantime, I would say if you're still doing Venusmon shenanigans, we're looking at tier 2. It is very much a gatekeeper deck. Next is Galacticmon. Now, Galacticmon did get new support in the new Tamer, and I think there was a new what's the new Venmon? I think it's Venmon. Yeah, a new Venmon back in Special Set 2.0. However, I definitely wouldn't necessarily call it Jank tier. Bearing in mind, Rogue tier is legal for Jank Tank, so I'd either be inclined to put it in tier 2 because of that new support, or into Rogue tier. I think I'm leaning towards Rogue tier. Yeah, I like being on the side of danger. I'm leaning towards Rogue tier, I think, guys. At me in the comments if you don't agree. Your disagreement fuels me. Anyways, Digimon. This is green gacha. This is Jank. This is absolutely Jank. Digimon can do some really cool things, like playing out the Imperial Dramon Paladin mode Ace for free, because it plays out a 10 play cost or less green Digimon from the top of your deck, and Imperial Dramon Paladin mode Ace, bearing in mind it's a level 7, is only 9 play cost due to the fact that it's an Ace. If you've got your Panyamon underneath you, you then can give that Paladin mode Rush, and it can just go off. If they're wide enough, you can just OTK from there. However, it's getting that set up. There's too many pieces to that combo to make it really work. So, yeah, Jank. I love it to bits, but Jank. Pawn Chessmon. So the Chessmon stuff. So this technically did get support with the Puppet engine from the structure deck with the Syndril stuff. However, I'd probably still call it either Jank tier or Rogue tier. I am going to go Rogue tier. Leviamon. Leviamon is a deck I have always kind of found a slightly disgusting to me. Not so disgusting that I put it in tier 1. And it's not been doing as much in the meta. Obviously, it's been very much kind of replaced by, basically every Leviamon player basically went, oh, why would I play one Demon Lord when I can play 7 of them? So it's been basically replaced by 7 Great Demon Lords. So I'm inclined to possibly put it in tier 2. But I'm going to lean towards 1.5 still. Yeah, 1.5 still. Jumbo Gamemon. I love Jumbo Gamemon. Black base, really, really fun. Blue base, I haven't played that in ages, but really good fun. However, it's shit. So therefore, Jank. Lord Nightmon, this is the yellow one. A lot of people putting this in Jank tier by the looks of it. Now, there are some crazy things that you could do with this Lord Nightmon. Technically, you could still Digivolve Lord Nightmon X on top of it, despite the fact that's purple and black, because it just takes a Lord Nightmon name. It can also play out stuff like Valkyrmon Ace for free. Which is kind of nuts. And if you've got the right stuff underneath it, because that's a when attacking, you could potentially have barrier or jamming, depending on what kind of yellow toolbox things you put in there. I'm not going to put it in Jank. I'm going to put it in Rogue tier. That's still Jank Tank legal, but I think it's on the higher end of stuff that's legal in Jank Tank. Plutomon. I'm going to agree with the other 12 people that have voted on this thus far. That is jank. That's absolutely jank. I don't care what you're putting under that, even if it's a meta engine like the Dark Animal stuff. This is jank, and this is only on here because Sam said he was going to play it, in Jank Tank, and he did once, and he didn't do it again. And that's all I'm going to say. Janked it. Aegis Dramon, the Jank Tank 5 champion. Now, I've put this in here because it's technically a different deck to Deep Savers, which we'll get into later. I'm going to say Rogue Tier, because I think that it needs a lot of pieces. It does a lot of very powerful things. But again, it's that consistency issue. And that's... If I could make a graph of kind of what is meta relevant and in the card game, it would have a vertical axis of consistency and a horizontal axis of power, and somewhere in the middle where those two meet is the sweet spot for something that's meta. If it goes far enough along on one side, it could still be meta, and if it goes high enough on the consistency bit, it would also be meta. But if it meets a sweet spot of the two, then it is for sure meta relevant. Aegis Dramon has a lot of the power side of things once it gets going, but if it's getting there. So I'm going to say Aegis Dramon is one of the previous champions returning that is still going to be legal in the format. Mitamamon. Now this kind of goes hand in hand with Kentaurismon. Very similar deck. You play them both together. And I'm going to give this the same rating I will also give Kentaurismon, which is Rogue Tier, because this deck actually it's one I'm considering using if of course it stays within the right parameters. But I do think it's one where essentially like it can get going really quick. The deck can be really aggressive to begin with, and then despite the fact it's making its security really low, does have lots of ways of stalling the opponent out and preventing them from them, taking you out. I mean, this guy gives security attack -2 to everything on the board with a level less than the amount of security left on the board. So if your opponent's only got one security and you've only got one security, they literally can't get game with anything. So for that reason, it's still going to be a Jank Tank legal deck, but one of the higher ones. Jesmon GX next. Now this is an odd one because there's a couple of people that voted it in tier 1. There's a couple of people that voted it tier 1.5. One person wrote it. Most people have put it tier 2. I would also bank on tier 2 because, again, this was one of those ones where the power of it is immense, especially if you manage to put Magnum on X underneath it. It becomes stupidly strong. Massively, massive in terms of DP, immune in terms of protection effects to basically anything. However, again, it's getting there. It's that consistency. And also the thing is, if you do manage to stop the Jesmon GX, which can be difficult, but is technically plausible, they don't always have a lot of recovery. So for that reason, I'm going to put tier 2 for Jesmon GX, or Jesmon X. Victory Greymon. Now this is basically just a Greymon deck with a quote-unquote bad top, or potentially a deck that you could be like, I'm going to really, be jankily experimental. I wanted to try and make a Victory Greymon deck for ages, but I've never been able to make it work. Maybe 2025 is my year for doing that. But I think the reason why it's so difficult to make a deck for it is that it does things that Greymon doesn't usually do, with the DP kind of base deletion effects. That's very much more like a Gallantmon thing. So it feels really weird within its own archetype. And for that reason, I'm going Jank Tier. Zed Garurumon for the same reason, because it's so different compared to all the other Garurumon stuff. To the point where this guy was actually a tech card in Mirage back in the day, back when I was playing Mirage. Once EX08 came out, I had Zed Garurumon in as a tech card. This guy, yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to put him in Jank Tier 2. And I'd love to see someone experiment with him. Apocalypse, Dark Masters. This is a tough one, because Megazoo has a lot of tricks. However, I mean, this is another one where, outside of Jank Tank, I would be tempted to give it a tier 2 rating, because of the fact it does use a meta engine, Purple Hybrid. But because it uses that meta engine, that meta engine won't be legal in Jank Tank, so therefore I'm thinking Rogue Tier. Alex will love me for that, because Megazoo is one of his favourite decks. Yeah, I'm putting Rogue Tier on there. Metal Garurumon, so Melga, used to be the poster child of meta relevancy back in BT9, and a little bit beyond, but not necessarily beyond that much further than there. Some people putting it in Rogue Tier, most people putting in Tier 2. I'm inclined to agree Tier 2. It's still, I think, slightly too good compared to a lot of the really jank stuff. You know, and technically speaking, you could use stuff like Gabubond in it as an ace, potentially, which would be cool. And you can get quite a high stack because of your X antibodies. So I think because of that reason, as well as the kind of the general way the deck works, I'm going to put this in Tier 2. Rosemon. Now, this is an interesting one. Most people going Tier 2. Some in the next amount of votes is Jank Tier. And then there's Rogue Tier. Now, something I've not mentioned yet with this is, I don't know for sure yet, but I think usually what we do is we go, when we're looking at the total results, which this is them currently, of what people have voted, we go on the average rating. But we tend to kind of go off of which tier list does look the most interesting in general. So if the most votes one is more interesting than the average rating one, we'll probably end up going for that. I'm not too sure yet. But currently, if we're going off of average rating, because it's got so many jank votes and tier 2 votes, if you're going based on average, then this is currently landed in Rogue Tier. Whereas if we did it on most votes, it's a Tier 2. So it's currently, where are you? Where are you, Rosemon? Rosemon. Or am I wrong? Is it in Tier 2? Tier 2. There's Bloomlord, which is a very similar deck. There you are. Yeah, so currently that's in Rogue Tier. So back to my list. It's tough, because technically speaking, it's very similar to Bloomlord. It uses a lot of the same stuff. I think, because it's not quite as good as Bloomlord, though. It's not as aggressive. It doesn't do as many checks. The burst mode is really good, though. But I think that can't burst on top of Rosemon X. It has to be on top of a Rosemon specifically. For the sake of an interesting format. And average, if we are going off of average rating, I'm giving it a Rogue Tier. Again, at me in the comments if you don't agree. Your judgment fuels me. War Greymon. So this is kind of War Greymon OTK, kind of the red version of Greymon. Tier 2. Yes, consistency is Greymon's absolute nightmare. You know, I'm still waiting on a variant of Greymon called Brick Greymon, frankly. But in terms of power, if it gets to that point, it's Tier 2. It's definitely Tier 2. Protection effects, stuff like that. You know, a lot of the difference between Rogue Tier, Jank Tier, and the upper levels is protection effects, and Greymon is the poster child of, at the very least, early protection effects in the game. So I'm going to put Tier 2 for that. Numamon, obviously got a lot of hits on the last ban list, I think it was. But it's still very quick. You can definitely do some crazy stuff with it, so Tier 2. Examon. Now, this is due some support in BT20, but again, as I mentioned, this list is technically not taking BT20 into account. Especially because we don't yet know how those things perform. So currently, because of its consistency issues, I'm going to put it in Jank Tier. Again, people might disagree, but that's okay. Brigadramon, D-Brigade. This could be a Rogue Tier, a Tier 2. I'm going to say Tier 2. Now, this is confusing because we do actually have Oriyumon for Digipolice, which is on here, which technically uses a lot of the same stuff. But I'm going to put Brigadramon in Tier 2. And then Oriyumon, there it is. I'm actually going to put that in Rogue Tier. Because technically they're different top ends for very similar decks, but they're not always the same in terms of their general builds. Fenrir Lugamon, so this is without Takumi Kazuchi. I'm going to say 1.5, because this still has a lot of really, you know, huge power. It could do a lot of, you know, it's not too bad in terms of consistency. Well, saying that, no, it can be pretty bad in terms of consistency, but I think the power level of it, though, is the definer. This is one of those ones that's so far along the power of my hypothetical graph that sometimes the consistency doesn't matter. So I would say Fenrir Lugomon is a 1.5, agreeing with the majority here. Alphamon. Now, this is interesting. Definitely on a lower rung. Tier 2, Rogue Tier, Jank Tier. And again, because of the way the average rating, if we go off of average rating, because of this, I think it's currently going to be landing in Rogue Tier. I personally think Alphamon, although it's not really performing right now, and obviously it's due support at BT20, though we've not seen it yet, I would probably bank this as... I want to... Part of me wants to go Rogue Tier, part of me wants to go Tier 2. Tier 2. Can't do it. I can't do it. Ulforce is basically just bad Mirage. Rogue Tier. Speaking of Mirage, it's still Tier 1. It's still Tier 1. You can make an argument for Tier 1.5, but if we're taking either normal Mirage or the Galaxy Loop into account, I think you're still looking at Tier 1. Shine Greymon, I would possibly put this at either Tier 1.5 or Tier 2. I think I might... I don't know. I mean, it used to be bonkers. But the BT17 support for it didn't really change much with the deck. To the point where if you're playing like this explicitly yellow version, it is worse than the red version. I would not say it's Tier 1 at all. Whoever's put it in Tier 1, I'm sorry, I disagree. For me, it's either Tier 1.5 or Tier 2. And I'm going to lean towards... it being in Tier... Oh, do I want to put it in Tier 2? Yeah, I'm going Tier 2 with it. I'm going Tier 2. I don't think it's good enough anymore. Ravemon, Jank. not even a question. Jank. Belphamon. Now, this is another one... because I wouldn't say that's in the same league as Shine Greymon. Maybe I need to... I can't change my vote for Shine Greymon now, can I? No, I can't change my vote now. Damn it. That was silly of me. Because Belphamon I don't think is necessary. Because again, this is one of those ones with a lot of protection. With the sleep mode. And I think that is beyond the realm of a lot of these. Saying that, Machinedra ones have got a lot of protection. I am... for the sake of interest, I'm going to go Rogue Tier. I don't know if I necessarily agree with myself doing that, but I'm doing it. I live dangerously, apparently. Blackwall Greymon X, I would not put it in Rogue Tier. This is Tier 2. The version of the deck that I'm building, or have built, which I'll be doing a deck profile on soon. In fact, actually, I've said I'm doing Mars 1 this week. It might be Blackwall Greymon X instead. I don't know yet. But, because I definitely know I'm doing at least one EX08 deck specifically, which will be Dinomon. FYI, because I'm so excited for that deck. But I've also been working on Blackwall Greymon. It will either be Blackwall Greymon or Mars 1 on Wednesday. You won't know until Wednesday. But anyways, Blackwall Greymon X, Tier 2. Leomon. A lot of people putting this in Rogue Tier. Leomon for me was a gatekeeper of Tier 2 for a long time. If you could beat Leomon, then you could pretty much say that you were meta or just about meta. And if you couldn't beat it, you were bad. You know, well, not bad, but, you know, just lower powered. In terms of this one, I think I'm going to agree with the majority and go Tier 2. Because although you've got stuff like... it does technically have an ace now with Saber Leomon Ace. You've got the Leomon X promo. A lot of that's not really doing stuff for the deck. And I think it's just not pulling its weight. So I am going to put Leomon in Rogue Tier. Leopardmon X. So this is kind of more of a green toolbox build. I mean, you can see Leopardmon X kind of being placed in a lot of different decks. But I am going to put this in Rogue Tier. Specifically for a reason where one of the cards that you can play out with this is probably not going to be in the Jank Tank format. And we'll get to that card later. You might be able to guess what it is, seeing that EX08 is on the horizon. But I'm going to put Leopardmon in Rogue Tier. Fanglong, I think too powerful for most Jank decks. This is a Tier 2 one. I mean, it does so much DP minus. You know, it got protection for days, aces for days. tier 2. Grace Nova. Now, most people are putting this in Rogue tier. The engine, however, would actually be banned in Jank Tank because it is a meta engine. It's, you know, Galaxy Loop is a meta engine. It's kind of ironic. It's being... Grace Nova is being punished for the fact that its engine is too good, because once you get to the top end, it takes quite a lot of work to have gotten into that top end, and you could do yourself a lot more favors by playing stuff which is just more consistent and easier to get into, stuff like your Mirage and your Hexablau and stuff like that. So Grace Nova is actually being punished for having too good of an engine. However, because of that engine, I'm going to lean towards tier 2, but currently looking like it might be legal in Jank Tank. If we're going based on most votes, if we're going based on average rating, I'm not too sure. But tier 2 is what I'm going to go with. Anubismon specifically. So this is the Dark Animal deck. The engine itself would be banned within Jank Tank. But I'm going to say tier 2 because obviously Anubismon itself is limited. It's not as consistent on its own. It kind of it becomes a part of other decks more often than not nowadays. So I'm going to say tier 2 still, but you know. Blue Flare. Blue Flare is a deck which I have always despised. I mean, for one thing, I am a classic Greymon stan, and I think any sort of why did we have to call this Metal Greymon Metal Greymon? It's not Metal Greymon. It's a different Greymon. It's a different design. Why do we have to call the other Greymon Greymon? It's not Greymon. It's a completely different design. Just call it something different. Why didn't we call it something different? Anyways, then, you know, from a design point of view, in terms of the deck, it's always been trouble. And I think it's trouble, like, there's a majority here putting it in Rogue tier. I'm not putting it in Rogue tier. I'm still putting it in tier 2. It's got new support on the horizon with the rest of the BT19 stuff in 2.5, which obviously technically does not mean anything for this tier list, but for me, I think the speed of the deck even now puts it in a realm above the majority of our jank stuff, so I'm going to put this in tier 2. Hunters. Now, Hunters is one which is very matchup dependent, but it can do really good against stuff. I mean, I remember it was at the 3v3 up in Birmingham a little while ago, and I was playing Mirage, obviously still, you know, one of the best decks in the format, and Hunters can actually completely shit on Mirage. It's you know, because it's just doesn't have stuff in its hand. Against other stuff, I'm not too sure, so the temptation would be Rogue tier, but I'm actually going to go tier 2 for this one. I think it's still technically much better than a lot of the jank stuff, and it's kind of a bit more of a gatekeeper, despite the fact it's not had any support. Do we? No, I'm gonna live dangerously. Rogue tier. Fuck it. Shout one again, same reason. It's getting support soon, but that support technically doesn't matter for this tier list specifically. Rogue tier. Fuck it. Omnimon Alter S. This is just an older, worse version of Omnimon. Consistency issues because it needs that leapfrog mechanic going from the Ogumon to the Gabumon to the Greymon to the Garurumon, blah 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 blah. It needs a lot of pieces to work. Most people are putting it in Rogue tier or Jank tier, which will make it Jank Tank legal. I myself, I think I'm going to put it in Jank tier. Shivamon. So this is the old Shivamon. You technically could use the Pulsemon stuff in it, but really it's kind of more of just a good green insect card at the moment. I think on its own as a deck, it's Jank tier. Within other stuff, it's potentially better than that, but it's being carried by that other stuff, and that other stuff wouldn't necessarily be legal in Jank Tank. So as a deck on its own, I'm putting it in Jank tier. Diaboromon, our Jank Tank 4 champion that unfortunately couldn't make it to Jank Tank the Champions. This one is a bit of a split here on whether it's going Rogue tier or Jank tier. I think because of its swarming potential, it can go so wide, and that's so hard to deal with for a lot of these Jank and Rogue decks. I think personally, I'm going to pop it in tier 2. I definitely wouldn't put it in Jank tier. There's an argument for it to be in Rogue tier, but I think it's probably got a better place in tier 2. Whether or not that will mean anything in the grand scheme of things, I don't know, but I'm going to go tier 2. Ukamons. This is kind of Ukamon Rush. Unfortunately, this has been limited now, so it's nowhere near as good. Jank tier. Jet Sylphimon. A lot of people putting this in Jank tier, but don't forget, there's a lot of new yellow hybrids now. You know, technically you could, you know, use this alongside your Koji stuff, your purple hybrid stuff. All of that is yellow. So I would not personally say this is Jank tier. You can also potentially use this as the yellow hybrid Marcus deck, which I know, I think Mario's Gaming World was very successful with that a couple of regionals ago. Well, I say a couple of regionals ago. It's probably a few regionals ago by now. But that, I think, for me, does not make it Jank tier. So my vote won't necessarily change where it's going to be on the tier list. But I think I'm going to lean towards either Rogue tier, which technically would be Jank legal still, or tier 2. And I think I'm going to lean towards tier 2 on that one. JP, the green hybrid stuff. Jank. Jank hasn't supported in ages. Dark Nightmon. Now this is interesting because Lord Nightmon as a deck is really good with the Dark Animal engine, and the more meta-relevant version is the purple one. However, the black-based version is still really good. And I mean, Lord Nightmon X as a card might be something we would not allow in Jank Tank. Just in case it is, I think I'm gearing towards not one of these, not tier 1, not tier 1.5, probably tier 2 is what I'm gearing towards. But I think based on the average votes, not going to mean much. Royal Knights, the OTK is too strong for most Jank decks to deal with. Tier 2. Grey Knights 1, easy. This was Jank when it came out. It is Jank now. Go away. Mervamon. Technically, she's more of an engine now, or like a tech piece in Purple Hybrid. But as a deck, still potentially has a lot of, you know, power, relatively speaking. So I think I'm going to go tier 2 as well. Marukimon / Mercurymon. The Fortitude stuff technically does have some stuff in EX08. Dinomon and Master Tyrannomon both have Fortitude, so technically speaking, you could tech those in without making it a Tyrannomon deck. But in terms of consistency, in terms of the level of cards available to it as a strategy, we're going Jank tier. We're going Jank tier on that one. I'm very tempted to experiment with that one, though. I don't know yet for sure. Lilithmon. Now, this obviously has the Lilithmon X stuff, but this is technically Milith. I think we've got a separate image for Lilithmon X herself. Yeah, we do. So this is technically Milith. I think tier 2 for that. I'm going to go with the majority. Mastemon. So much intermittent support for this, and yet it's still fairly inconsistent. You know, if it gets to where it's going, really strong. The Mastemon Ace is obviously quite good. But it's getting there. It's the fact you've got no level 3 searchers. I know Digipanda did a really good video on that the other day. Make sure you check that out if you haven't. Rogue tier. Rogue tier. Kentaurismon. We put Mitamamon into Rogue tier. I'm putting Kentauris here in Rogue tier too. Seraphimon. Now, technically speaking, you could count this as 3 Great Angels, but I have that on the list already. So this is kind of more like Seraphimon Yellow Vaccine, I guess. It's one of the ones I probably need to get rid of because, you know, it's a bit out of date. Tier 2. Shadow Seraphi. Some people putting it in tier 1. This is a really contentious one. Wow, look at that. Tier 1, tier 1.5, tier 2, Rogue tier, Jank tier. That is all over the place. I think I'm going to go with the majority there and go tier 2. Because technically this is kind of Setcon extra steps, I guess. So tier 2. Dorbikmon needs so much to do its OTK. Really lacks the consistency. I would not put it in tier 1.5. I'm not even going to put it in Rogue tier. It's going in Jank. Rasenmon. This hasn't had support since BT7, BT8. I think it's BT8, I think. Based on the card image there. Jank tier. I don't even know what that deck does, I'll be honest. Devimon, despite getting support in EX6, I'm going to agree with the majority here. Jank tier. Cherubimon. So this is the Alliance Bunnies, but with the Cherubimon top. Cherubimon Ace, obviously, is a very, very strong card. But the actual engine, is like obviously Bunnies is quite good as an engine, but the majority of the stuff for the Cherubimon engine is not necessarily the same as the stuff you'd use in Bunnies proper. So I wouldn't say Jank tier. I think this is a high power level Jank Tank deck. So I'm going to give it Rogue tier. Go with the majority again. Blue Armor, still doing really well. Still one of the best decks around. Lots of power, you know. Still putting up some good results in places, though I think it's topped a lot recently, but not won a lot recently. So I'd almost be tempted to go with the minority here and go tier 1.5 instead of tier 1. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Tier 1.5. Fuck it. Rapidmon, I think this clearly is not as good as Magnamon X, though. But I also don't think... is it a tier 2? When's the last time we saw bunnies anywhere? When did bunnies last do well? I'm going to go tier 2, actually. Fuck it. Shakuamon. Now, I use this as an engine for my Jumbo Gambamon list, and I think it's a surprisingly good engine. Has a lot of really neat tricks. But, saying that, despite the fact it's got some immunity effects, and the petition, all that kind of shebang, it does lack in terms of consistency sometimes in getting its pieces. You've got it's a DNA deck, it has that bricking issue, but unlike certain other DNA decks, it doesn't have the power to really do a lot of checks. In fact, sometimes Shakuamon can do the opposite and make doing checks harder for you because it will put something into security, and if you don't have enough oomph behind you, that can really be a problem. So I'm going to agree with the majority here and go Rogue tier as well. Sylphimon, similar kind of vein to Shakuamon, but without the protection, with more deletion stuff, but yeah, Rogue tier as well. 7DL, I hate 7DL. Can you tell I don't like a lot of purple decks? I don't really... I have fun playing purple sometimes, but going up against purple can be just an absolute head scratcher. And 7DL is one of those decks, and you can do some really nasty things with it. Obviously, I know James manages to do a Shine Greymon loop in this. Which, speaking of, Talmon loop obviously is not in this tier list either because the BT20 stuff isn't out yet. And Shine Greymon itself is banned in the Jank Tank format. But I am going to put this in tier 1.5. Go with the majority again. Ooh. Legend Arms, Ragnarlord. Typically speaking, Rogue tier, but the newer stuff is quite strong within its archetype. I think possibly based on average rating, this could potentially still fall into Rogue. Even if I were to put tier 2. But I'm leaning towards tier 2 on it because I know how strong it can be. Saying that, I took it to a standstill with something fairly weak the other day on DCGO. Tier 2. Shakamon, Rogue tier. Does a lot of really cool things, but not cool enough. Rogue tier for me. Chaosmon, so close to getting new support in BT20. Won't have it for EX08 and the first Jank Tank of this year because I haven't even said Jank Tank's going to be on January the 22nd is when we're filming that. So we'll be getting that edited hopefully before 2.5 comes out. I'm going to say one person's gone tier 2, most have gone Rogue tier. I think personally for me right now Jank tier, and even when it's got the new support, I don't think it's that great. Shangpengmon, I'm going to give this the same kind of vote as I did for Aegistramon because this goes very well with that, so Rogue tier. Shroudmon, it's kind of the least effective Pulsemon top and the least effective Pulsemon deck. I'm going to go Rogue tier for that one too. Torrent Capitarimon, a lot of protection. Obviously Grandis, we kind of discussed this earlier. This is the better insect deck, so I'm going to say tier 2 for Tyrant. Goldramon, 4 Great Dragons, not 3 Great Dragons, 4 Great Dragons. Jank, it's just not consistent enough. No way. Ooh. Now this is an interesting one. Most people have gone Jank tier for this one. Chaos Gallantmon. But it's technically speaking, getting support because of the new EX08 Gallantmon X line. Now, explicitly, that is better in Gallantmon proper than Chaos Gallantmon. Chaos Gallantmon is nowhere near as good as that Gallantmon stuff will be. So I'm not going to put it in Jank tier, but I'm also not going to stop it from being in Jank Tank. I'm going to go Rogue tier. This is, for me, a higher power Jank deck. Bloomlord, Gatekeeper, easy, tier 2, despite a lack of support. Bosh, done. Bagramon, easy, it's been shit since it came out. Jank tier. Amphimon, kind of another deck which is like almost bad Mirage in the sense it can do a lot of unsuspending and has jamming, but doesn't necessarily always have the same degree of board control. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the majority and go Rogue tier. Fuck it. Diabitmon, similar kind of thing. This is kind of like just the worst green deck in a lot of cases. I wouldn't say Jank tier, but I would say Rogue tier for it. I'm gonna stay consistent. Ghost Game, you're all Rogue tier. Dino Rex, technically speaking, getting support in the form of the new dinosaur stuff in EX08. However, it is a worse top for that deck. I'm putting it in Jank tier. Grandis again. Have we already done Grandis? Grandis, are you a dupe on here? Grandis, are you a dupe on here? I swear I'd done you already. Have I not done Grandis? I swear I did Grandis before. Hang about. Hang about. Where are you? Where are you? Maybe I didn't? Definitely talked about it earlier. Anyways, I'm going to go Rogue tier. Fuck it. Grand Dracmon. Easy. Jank tier. Hasn't had support in ages. Takamikazuchi Fenrir. So this, I think, is tier 1. It's still really, really fucking good. The Kazuchi version of the same deck is not tier 1. It's technically not as good as the Fenrir version because of the lack of alliance and stuff like that. However, it could still high roll an OTK quite easily. So I'm going to say tier 1.5 for that version. Yellow Vaccine, got some hits on the ban list. It's not as good as it was before, but I'm still putting it at 1.5. Red Hybrid, that is actually legitimately a good deck and probably the best red deck of the format, tier 1. Blue Hybrid, so this is, well, Koji Hybrid, I guess we'll call it, not Blue Hybrid necessarily, but this one, most people are putting this in tier 1. It's a bit slower than it used to be. It doesn't have the Ukamons, it doesn't have the Hammer Sparks as much, obviously they're limited. I'm going to go tier 1.5. Kazuchimon. So this is the Pulsemon stuff. A lot of people putting this in Rogue. One person's put it in tier 1. I don't know why. Maybe that's because they've taken the Takamikazuchi stuff into account. But I personally, for me, think this has a higher ceiling than the Rogue and Jank stuff. So I'm going to put it in tier 2. I've had a lot of fun with that deck. I know how good it can be. I think for me it's tier 2 deck. We'll see where it goes on the average ratings, but Argomon, even with the stuff it got in BT17, still kind of trash. Jank. Grand Locomon, you're basically just playing bad Machine Dramon at that point, and Machine Dramon's only Rogue tier. Jank. Eosmon. Eosmon's very strong, but lacks consistency sometimes. Rogue. Rogue, I think. Omnimon. Again, consistency is an issue, but it is just a board wipe, and once Omnimon is actually out, all it needs is 2 turns and you're dead, which after the board wipe, you know, it might as well be 1 turn. I'm going to go 1.5. Blackwall Greymon OTK, the least consistent of all the Greymon stuff, and that's saying something. One of the most fun. It was the first big deck profile on this channel, so I love this deck. And I think I'm going to go with the majority and actually put it in Rogue tier and not tier 2 like the other Greymon stuff. So who knows? I might be playing it at some point. If, of course, it stays in Rogue tier throughout the year. 3GA. This is probably, technically speaking, the best yellow deck of the format right now. I'm not going to put it in tier 1 because it's had a lot of tops but not a lot of wins. But then saying that red hybrid's kind of in that same vein. But I wouldn't call it tier 1. So I'm going to go tier 1.5. Just from me personally playing it. Myotismon, majority here, rogue tier. Higher power jank deck. Same with D-Links. That is going in rogue tier. Three Musketeers. Now, interestingly, a lot of people have put this in rogue tier. It's got a lot of stuff for it going on, but again, consistency is an issue. Let's Live Dangerously, rogue tier, boom, done. Ice Snow, the first of the two Ice Snow decks. Technically speaking, they're the same deck, so I'm probably going to give them the same rating. This obviously is the more Hexaball oriented stuff, I guess. Consistency again is a massive issue for it, rogue. Sendril, a lot of people putting this in jank tier, and along with another deck we'll get into, there was someone, apologies, I can't remember your name off the top of my head, but I was chatting with them on the comments for the last episode of Jank Tank Champions, because obviously the tier list is linked on there as well, and they were saying Sendril shouldn't be as low as people are voting it, and I think the reason why people are voting it are as low as it is, especially here in the UK, and apologies, I'm not too sure where the person I was speaking to is from, but in the UK, the promos for this are really hard to get a hold of, and I think that sometimes is skewing the power level of the deck. I personally would not put it in tier 1.5 still. I mean, where's it topping? Tier 1.5 is for like the borderline meta decks, stuff you're seeing top a bit, or has a high power level. So for me, I'm actually going to go tier 2, which probably won't change this at all if we're going on average ratings or on most votes. But I'm going to go tier 2. I don't personally think it's jank. Zafaga, tier 2. Poster Child Liberator is getting some support in the form of Medieval Gallantmon, technically speaking, but that's also, technically speaking, every green deck is getting that. But Zafaga is one of the decks that can take advantage of it the most. But it's still not really done much in Japan, so I'm going to say tier 2. Nature Spirits. So even with the support that this is getting, this is a higher power level jank deck. It is rogue tier. It is fun as fuck to play. I love Nature Spirits, but good it is not in the grand scheme of things. It's good compared to other bad decks, but in terms of the actual general game, it's still bad, especially if you're playing it in a non-consistent version. Like there is a version of it that has topped a few tournaments in Japan, which is where you're just using green stuff and you're actually using Medieval Gallantmon in it, funnily enough, which obviously is not an NSP card. However, if you're playing the more pure version of it, which is what I play because it's more fun, even though it's worse, it's rogue tier. So that to me, high level jank deck. Heavy Metal Dramon, even with the support coming in BT20, it's still going to be bad, so it's even worse right now. Jank tier for me. Beelzemon, tier 2. It still does a lot of stuff. I was actually playing against this just before I was doing recording, and I won the first game that I went against them with my jamming Greymon list. Bumped into the same player, and they just OTK'd me. So, tier 2. Lilith, I wouldn't put it as high as tier 1.5. But I would not put it as low as rogue tier, so I'm going to go tier 2. Big Ukomon. We've lost one of your Ukos. Who the fuck put this in tier 1.5? Jank. Absolutely. Greymon Toolbox. This is the two together. I put Black War Greymon into tier 2. I put War Greymon into tier 2. I ain't changing for this one. Tier 2. Mamemon. Jank. It's terrible. This is the other deck that I was talking about in the comments with the person talking about Sendril, is Dynus. Now, I think the reason why this has gotten so many jank tier votes is because it has a self-immolation style. It takes out its own security to do stuff, unsuspend, do DP minuses. But unlike other decks, like Kentaurismon, this does have ways of recovering that security once they get low enough. They don't have any of the security minus stuff that the Kentauris deck has, but it's got, it's got raid, it's got blocker. You can cheese the end of turn effect, because if you manage to go, you pass turn, end of turn. If you manage to then, excuse me, still recovering from chest infection. If you then manage to pass turn back to yourself with, say, like Akari or your one-off TK, which you wouldn't use necessarily in Dynasty 1, but just, for the sake of example. You could then, pass turn again and use the end of turn again to recover once again if you're low enough. So for me, I'm not going to put it in Jank tier. I'm not going to put it in Rogue tier. For me, I think it's tier 2. It's better than people give it credit for. But looking at the average ratings, it's probably going to be Jank legal, which is quite exciting, actually. Royal Base. I've not gone up against this enough IRL. But when I've gone against it on DCGO, it's never really impressed me. It's not a Jank tier deck. But I think I'm going to put it in Rogue tier. For me, it's not as good as an inset deck as Tyrant is. So, Rogue tier for me. Hobby, Lord Nightmon. We kind of already covered this with Dark Nightmon. The purple version of it is obviously bonkers. Not been topping as much recently. I don't think, from memory. And definitely not been winning as much recently. But it's still disgusting. This is another one where it's so far along on the power side of the graph that it becomes meta-relevant. Consistency is its main issue, despite the fact it just plays all the generic searches. But its power level is so strong. I mean, it can basically just get a pseudo OTK. You can stun the board. You can, if you go up into Shine-Gomon Rune mode, and obviously Rune mode is not illegal in this, but even then, you're stopping them from digivolving, you're clearing their board with the collision. Yeah, it's tier 1. It's tier 1. Millennium Mon. No one's put this in Jank, but a lot of people have put this in Rogue. Once it gets to its top end, it is very hard to put away, but it's getting there. So I'm inclined to agree with the majority here and put it in Rogue. Shoto Mother. 2 cards that people never thought would become a match made in heaven or in hell, depending on your point of view. I'm not going to say tier 1. I'm not going to say... I'm going to say tier 1.5, I reckon. Blue Hybrid. So this is the true blue hybrid stuff. Technically also does count for Ice Snow. But I think... probably not good enough to say tier 2. So I'm going to say Rogue tier. Higher power level Jank deck. Same here. Although there's less of a case for tier 1.5 and tier 2 based on the other votes. But I've never actually seen someone try and make a deck out of these. So we don't really know if they're Jank or Rogue, really. It's more like an unknown category. But I'm going to say, purely for the basis of the hybrid mechanic and some of the stuff it can do, I'm going to go for Rogue tier. Same again. Not really a lot of people making decks out of these, but they are useful in other things like Black Blocker, stuff like that. So I'm going to go Rogue tier. Same again, Rogue tier. Purple Hybrid. A lot of confusion here because people have seen the Loemon and gone, that's not a Velgamon. Therefore, we've even some people putting in Jank tier, some people putting it in tier 1. Now the thing is, Purple Hybrid is very numerous in the meta right now, but it's not performing as well as it could be, or should be potentially. So I'm going to go with the majority and go tier 1.5. For me, not a tier 1 deck, but obviously it's so widely used in the meta, and as an engine, don't forget, that I think we're going to put it in 1.5. Lucamon, really annoying to go up against once it gets going, with the amount of recovery and stuff and deletion. I'm going to say tier 2 though. Ryugamon, deep sea stuff. Has a lot of tricks with the decode, but doesn't really get anywhere. Rogue tier for me. So this is the hybrid stuff for the kind of Takuya, Susanoo stuff. Is really strong when it gets going. Is a real head scratcher to play. I tested it once. Dane let me borrow his deck. Real head scratcher to play until you kind of get into it. Hasn't really been doing a lot in terms of the meta. It's ironically not as good as Red Hybrid. It's neither as consistent or necessarily as powerful. So I'm not going to say tier 1.5 for it. I'm actually going to put it in tier 2. Not a rogue deck, but tier 2. And similar vote, I'm going to put this in tier 2 too. Ancient Volcanomon. What even is that deck? Jank. Ancient Mermaidmon. The Lanamons and stuff like that could be useful. There's more of them that are of blue colour. So I'm going to... No, I'm going to go Jank Tier. I'm going to go Jank Tier. Ancient Troymon, Jank Tier. Imperial Dramon. Our banned champion of champions. Never to return to Jank Tank again. Still really good. Came second at the EU regionals. Only lost to Mirage. I'm putting it in tier 1. Dinomon. Now, I really want to play this in Jank Tank, because I love Tyrannomon, and I've not played Tyrannomon in Jank Tank in ages. However, it's also much better than it's ever been before. It's really good, especially with some of the new stuff it's getting. The obviously it's going to be for BT20, but the promo Rust Tyrannomon, stuff like that. So I'm not going to put it in Rogue Tier. As much as I want to for my own selfish desires, I'm not doing it. But it's definitely not tier 1.5, whoever's done that, so I'm putting it in tier 2. This, we kind of discussed this with the Ice Snow stuff. I'm putting it in Rogue. Deep Savers. I'm definitely not putting it in Jank Tier, and I know one person who put it in Jank Tier, Sam. Because Sam's put Jank Tier on a lot of his decks, I think. I don't know for certain if he's done that, because he's not owned up to it. But my theory, because after he voted, funnily enough, all of his decks suddenly had Jank Tier on them as votes. And I know that's something that he would do just to fuck with me. So therefore, I'm putting this in tier... No, I'm not putting this in tier 1. I'm being honest. Tier 2 for me. Justimon. Oh, this deck does do a lot. I mean, he's got 3 keywords on him. You can end the game by playing him out because of the rush. You've got an end of attack thing because his end of turn effect lets you do a blitz effect essentially. I'm saying tier 2. I think people are underestimating that a bit. Pyramidimon. A lot of protection with the fragment stuff. Did some really cool stuff in the comic, but whether or not that's going to be very realistic, I don't know. I'm not putting it in Jank, but I reckon a higher level Rogue Tier deck. Barbomon X. You could say Rogue, but I'm not. I'm going to say Jank for that. Nightmare Soldiers. I think this is going to be a higher power level Rogue Tier deck. It's technically speaking, I think, better than Nature Spirits. So you could make an argument for Tier 2. But I think... Nah, I'm going to Rogue. Rogue Tier. Gallantmon X. Now, technically speaking, this doesn't have all of its support because of the rest of the BT19 stuff being in 2.5. But this Gallantmon X is so good, and the Wargroundmon X is so good, and it's right now where it has got all of its support in Japan, it's wrecking the place. It's doing so much. It's having so many wins, so many great, results. Yes, it's technically incomplete, but I'm going to go tier 1. Medieval Gallantmon, not necessarily a deck, but a very splashable card. Leopardmon can abuse this, for example. A lot of green decks can really take advantage of it. I mean, like I said, even NSP, if you go fully green and use this is something really good. It's just a very strong removal card. Really does a lot of controlling of the board. I'm not going to put it in tier 1 because technically speaking, it's not a deck. Although you could use it as a top end in Gallantmon if you wanted to. It does have Gallantmon in name, so you could technically do that. But I'm going to go tier 1.5. Bond of Bravery, Ogu Bond. It's definitely it's either a tier 2 or a Rogue Tier. Ooh, it does do a lot of strong stuff. It's technically speaking as strong as some of the Greymon stuff if you're really being picky. Doesn't have as much protection as the Greymon stuff. Does require a lot more consistency things. And classically speaking, Ogubond has always been like rogue / jank tier. That's tough. That's actually tough. I mean, I know it can be good. It does require a lot of stuff to really get going, though. agree or disagree with me, guys, I'm going Rogue Tier. And I'm going to do the same for Bond of Friendship. The reason why I'm going to do the same for this is, technically speaking, I would assuredly have given this Tier 2 back when we had Hammer Spark at 4 and Ukomon at 4. Especially also this works really well as like a Gabu hybrid kind of deck if you have those available to you. But I'm also going to put this in Rogue Tier along with Ogabond. Renamon, Sakuyamon stuff. So obviously the Talmon loop is not legal yet because we don't have the Talmon Ace. Because the BT20 is not out. We also don't have the Shangomon Ruin mode because you can't, you know, as part of that loop. So in Jank Tank specifically, that deck won't be as good. This is more pure Sakuyamon stuff, and I think because of the amount of pieces it needs to get working, still Rogue Tier for me. Setcon, our Jank Tank 2 champion. I think this is a gatekeeper deck that belongs in Tier 2. Always has been an anti-meta. Off it goes. Skull Hybrid, our Jank Tank 6 winner. Now, I got this through in a loophole because we didn't have the meta engine rule for a period of time. Whereas now we've got that rule. So technically you can't play this deck as what I played it as. You could potentially play it with like a different, like maybe with the green-red stuff or the blue-red stuff. So the kind of, you know, that the Kumamon, that sort of stuff. But for the sake of what I discussed with someone at the time when Skull Hybrid won, I'm going to put it in Tier 2. Not in... So I think that should probably make it so that this is going to absolutely not be legal for Jank Tank. Which breaks my soul, but it is what it is. And then our very last deck we're looking at is Birds, because I updated the image for it and it put it last. A lot of people putting this in Tier 2. I'm gonna actually go Tier 1.5 because this has been doing a lot more tops. You know, not that no wins, but a lot of tops. You know, kind of here and there. So I think it's a lot stronger than people give it credit for. It's done a lot more tops than a lot of these other Tier 2 decks, you know, that I've been voting for. So for me, Tier 1.5. Plus I know how good that is. But that is my tier list. Agree with it or disagree, but that is mine. Let's see what that's done to the overall total results. So this is based on the average rating. Like I say, that's most likely what we're going with. So Tier 1 right there. Tier 1.5 right here, so 9% of it. 25% of the board being taken up by Tier 2. Then the biggest tier by far is Rogue Tier. It's this higher power level kind of area. And some of the decks I voted higher up are still here. So stuff like Alphamon, what else is Justimon? I don't think necessarily is going to be here. So that is very spicy. All of these decks will be Jank Tank legal. And if you don't want them to be Jank Tank legal, you will have to vote to change that. Because I can no longer change that because I've done my votes. You know, but I think, to be fair, I think this is still a very exciting Jank Tier, Rogue Tier and Jank Tier. But this is also why, if you look at the amount of votes here on these, this is why we've got Rogue Tier legal in Jank Tank now, because Rogue Tier is so big because there's so much of a disparity over what is Rogue and what is not, and what is Jank and what is not. You know, that we kind of had to, for the sake of diversity, we had to bring that rule in. Yes, Rogue Tank does not flow off the tongue as well, so we are still called Jank Tank, but all of these decks will be legal if they are still where they are here by Thursday morning. So if you guys want to change this tier list, do go down to the comments and vote. Voting poll is still available until Thursday morning. So if you want to change this up, make sure you do. And what I will do as well is, if the tier list does change between when this video comes out and or even when I'm recording, really, let's say Thursday morning, Friday, that sort of time, I will post images of the updated tier list onto the YouTube community page and onto the Discord, so you guys all know what we're going to be playing with for Jank Tank. But that was really fun. I don't actually know how long that took me, probably way too long, and I'm rambling, but join us for Jank Tank 8 whenever we bring that out. We are filming on January the 22nd, as I mentioned, and for the deck profiles we're doing this week, whatever they may be, because like I say, I haven't fully decided yet. Anyways, like and subscribe, ding that notification bell. I hope you guys are enjoying the content and 2025 as a whole. You know, like I say, this is the first time I'm saying hello to you guys in 2025. Yeah, let me know what's going on and keep it digital.